The Stone of Scone. Known for his military campaigns in Scotland, King Edward I's aim was to consolidate English rule over the country. Invading Scotland in 1296, he defeated John Balliol, who Edward had helped put on the Scottish throne. After the Battle of Dunbar, Balliol surrendered. It's not factually known why he decided to retrieve the stone after defeating the Scots, but it's widely thought he took it because it was a symbol of the Scottish monarchy and to assert his rule. It's specified in a chronicle that on August the 8th, Edward passed by the Abbey of Scone, where, having taken away the stone, which the kings of Scotland were accustomed at the time of their coronation to use as a throne, he carried it to Westminster. So let's start with what the legend says about that remarkable journey of this revered big stone. In the Old Testament, Genesis 28:18, it's claimed that when fleeing from his twin brother, the patriarch Jacob laid his head on the stone as a pillow when he stopped to rest in a place he would later call Bethel. He, it was stated, had a vision while he slept of a ladder reaching up to heaven, where he claims he saw the angels of God ascending and descending on the ladder, and God stood above it. After God spoke to him, he woke up and consecrated the stone he had used as a pillow. That's the main legend. It goes on to tell of the journey of the stone, and there are differing stories. But the main one is that Jacob's sons took it to Egypt, and then somehow it ended up in Spain. It was then, legend goes, thought to have been transported to Ireland by the weeping prophet Jeremiah, or it was taken by the Spanish king's son, Simon, when he invaded Ireland around 700 BC. Simon, it states, laid the stone on top of a sacred hill at Tara, where the stone became known as the Stone of Destiny. The legend goes on to tell us that it was there that Irish kings would be inaugurated while seated on the stone. The stone, or a stone, appears in Argyllshire in Scotland. It was then thought to have been placed at an abbey in Iona before King Kenneth MacAlpin took it to the monastery of Scone. Here the future kings of Scotland would be seated for their inauguration. With such history and mystery surrounding the stone, the legends have been thoroughly discussed and most of them dispelled, but there is no denying that its roots are deeply felt in Scotland. Scottish geologist John McCulloch studied the stone in the early 1800s, and he realised through his investigation that the stone was made of Scottish old red sandstone from the geologic period of Devonian age. Over the years, the qualities of the stone have been examined minutely by acclaimed professors in their respective fields, giving us a more precise picture of where it was from and when it came to be. It has been concluded that the rock was quarried from the lower old red sandstone that was exposed in the Scone area. So in short, the Stone of Scone is exactly that. Ideas and thoughts of the actual size and shape of the stone from its humble beginnings has also been intensely researched. The stone was indented in the middle, which made for a nice comfortable seat to place one's royal bum. It would seem that stones were often used for ceremonies like the coronation of a king, so it wasn't seen as unusual back then for them to be close to the site of the ceremony. Why? It was a common and easy commodity. Anyone who was held as royalty could sit on any great rock and claim it as a throne. The ceremonial site was often held outdoors, so the use of large stones as a makeshift area was common. A simple stone it may be, but this stone was and is a symbol of Scottish monarchy and holds so much history. But time wasn't good to the royal stone over the years. It's been shaped into an oblong block and has the obvious worn signs of age and human interaction. The two large iron rings fitted on both sides were probably fitted in medieval times as a way to transport it, but it's debatable who fitted them. It suffered from the constant attention it had gleaned from myths and historic meanings, with people wanting to feel the stone that holds a mystery. The desire to hold a piece of the Stone of Destiny to help people with their own fate led to pieces being chipped off. There are some slight signs of damage when used to empower a cause, and the desire to see it return back to its place of origin would cause the stone to be damaged all the more. Obviously, since the Middle Ages, the stone has worn down somewhat, but it hasn't changed that much. Once removed from Scone, the stone was stored at Westminster while a chair was being designed to accommodate it. Edward gave instructions that the throne was to be made of bronze. This was later abandoned by Edward, for reasons we don't know, as the throne was already in production. But it's thought the main reason for this change was due to the weight of the finished throne. Once the stone was added, it would be so heavy it would be immovable, making it almost impossible for it to be moved elsewhere if needed. Eventually a wooden chair was designed and made by Walter of Durham and became known as the St Edward's Coronation Chair. A royal figure embellished on the back of the chair is thought to be Edward the Confessor, sitting with his feet resting on a lion. It's thought to have been built around 1300, with royal contractors adding to the chair's decor. Adam the goldsmith added gilded lions to the chair at a later date, and in 1727 4 more were added to replace the originals. The seat of the stone was also the seat of the throne, before a wooden seat was added at a later date. On completion, the throne was transported to Westminster Abbey and placed in the chapel of St Edward the Confessor, where it would remain for centuries before the doors of the chapel closed to the public in 1997. A year later, it was moved to the ambulatory near the tomb of Henry V. More recently, in 2010, it was taken to a specially made room in St George's Chapel for conservation and cleaning work. It's been recorded that the stone would possibly have been placed under the throne by the 1300s, and once installed in the abbey, the stone was chained to the floor. Once the fear of the stone being stolen subsided, it remained unchained. The chair was moved out of the abbey once when Oliver Cromwell was installed as Lord Protector at Westminster Hall, and then when Queen Victoria used it at her 1887 Golden Jubilee. Both the chair and the stone were removed during World War II. The chair went to Gloucestershire Cathedral and the stone was secretly buried in the abbey. Just like the stone, the throne has also received damage over the years. There are engravings on the back of the throne, likely done by the 18th and 19th century young boys from Westminster School. In June 1914, a small explosive had been placed beneath the coronation chair by some members of the suffragettes, and it exploded at around 5:40 p.m. when there were about 100 people in the abbey. A fragment was blown off the chair, and a large quantity of plaster fell from the ceiling. The dust of the plaster and the smoke from the bomb left the impression of a great catastrophe, as people rushed from the building. However, there were no injuries reported. Then, Christmas 1950 saw 4 Scottish students, Ian Hamilton, Gavin Vernon, Kay Matheson and Alan Stewart, became responsible for the removal of the stone. They planned the heist for months with the backing of businessman Robert Gray. After a first failed attempt, when one student, Ian Hamilton, was caught hiding under a trolley by the night guards, they tried again the very next day. The 4 managed to break into Westminster Abbey and remove the stone from beneath the coronation chair. As soon as they did, they dropped it, breaking it into 2 pieces. The smaller piece was taken straight to the car, and then, after a bit of a scare, when a passing policeman gave them a bit of a heart-racing moment, Hamilton, on his own, dragged the larger stone to the waiting car. Thinking they had been rumbled, they drove into a field in Kent, where they buried the larger piece of stone. Kay Matheson then took the smaller part in the boot of a car to a friend's house and left both the car and the stone there. They all returned to Scotland. It would be weeks before the 4 students managed to get the pieces of the stone back to Scotland. The stone was repaired and then placed at Arbroath Abbey, where they managed to keep it hidden for several months. In April 1951, after a tip-off, the stone was discovered by the police and returned to Westminster Abbey. The students were arrested and charged with theft, but they were not convicted.
Westminster Abbey, which since William the Conqueror has seen the coronation of all but one British sovereign, is without the coronation stone. For missing from its setting behind the Abbey's high altar is the Stone of Scone. Ever since Edward I brought it from Scotland to England in 1296, the stone has remained in the Abbey, and on Christmas Eve it was still in its place beneath the coronation chair. On Christmas morning the stone was gone. The Dean of Westminster called the disappearance an act of sacrilege, and spoke of the stone as a precious relic treasured by millions throughout the British Commonwealth. These initials, JFS, apparently newly scratched on the chair, are thought to stand for Justice for Scotland, and support the theory that the stone's disappearance is the work of extreme Scottish nationalists. The trail of damage shows how the stone was dislodged from the chair, and the route by which it was hauled out of the Abbey. The trail led round the south transept to Poets' Corner. At Poets' Corner, a padlocked door had been forced open. From there, it is thought that the stone was dragged to a point on Millbank. There, the trail was lost. Just round the corner at Scotland Yard, a nationwide search was organised. The police have issued the description of a man and woman who were seen in a Ford Anglia car near the Abbey in the small hours of Christmas morning. Orders went out for a strict search on roads, ports and airfields. But 4 days of intensive police work brought no definite clue. The search centred particularly on routes leading to the north, for many Scots are known to hope that Scone Palace may again become the home of the stone, as it was more than 600 years ago when the Scottish kings were crowned here. Many Scotsmen feel that the removal of their Stone of Destiny may be a gesture to stir up Scottish sentiment for home rule. The search took a new turn with the police working on the theory that the stone may have been dumped underwater. An anonymous caller put Scotland Yard onto the Serpentine, and on Friday morning the lake was dragged for the second time after an unsuccessful attempt during the previous night. The central point in the operation was below the bridge in Kensington Gardens. There, after several hours of work, the police chains caught on 2 large objects. One object turned out to be a jettisoned safe. The other, with measurements roughly equaling the lost stone, could not be recovered without extra hauling gear, and by late Friday afternoon, nobody yet knew just what it was. Meanwhile, the police have been taking precautions to ensure the safety of the Saxon coronation stone, which stands near the Guildhall at Kingston-on-Thames. For a few months ago, the suggestion had been made that the Saxon stone might be secured as a ransom for the Stone of Scone. The Stone of Scone was restored to its resting place beneath the coronation chair in Westminster Abbey this week. But it is not its original place, for the chair itself was moved last year from its site behind the high altar to Henry VII's chapel. There, behind an 11-foot-high bronze grille, the chair and the stone will stay, at least until shortly before the coronation. No one is allowed to pass the grille, so that even pictures had to be taken from outside the forbidden area. An inch-thick chain now padlocks the stone to the chair. So it is felt that no intruder could move the stone from its 650-year-old place in Westminster Abbey.
The stone was eventually returned to Scotland on St Andrew's Day in 1996, where it sits alongside the Scottish crown jewels at Edinburgh Castle. In 2024, the stone is apparently going to Perthshire, but before then it will be brought back to Westminster for the coronation of King Charles III, before returning to Scotland once more.